I did want to ask you about your background and how you decided and when you decided to follow the path of the artist.
Well, I don't want to ramble on too long, but it's an early start. Uh, when I was growing up in Southern Virginia, uh, I I used to love to draw, and as a kid, 6 years old, I recently discovered after my mother passed away that she had given me a sketchbook and written on the front Bobby's drawings at age 6. And I mainly it was cowboys and Indians and lots of violence. But I did love to draw at that age, I'm glad that she kept that. And I also discovered after she passed away that she had kept some of my re report cards from my teachers as an elementary school, and then first or second grade, I can't remember which, the teachers said he really loves to draw and he's very good. So I had it kind of planted in my system from an early age, but then I got involved in sports and football particularly, and played basketball and track and everything too. And the art was still in my life, but it wasn't getting the focus that it really needed. And that continued on through college when I was fortunate enough to get a football scholarship and was very active in that. And then after that, I I went to law school, and that took a lot of time and focus. But I do remember during law school that I did some portrait work and some figure work in my room when I would finish uh, studying and learning the law. Then I started a law practice, and actually, I really enjoyed the law practice. It was something social about it, getting to know your clients and your staff and the judges. It was very social, and I like that part of it, and I like the the intellectual challenge of dealing with these cases and the people involved in it. And while I was practicing law, I somehow, I think it was through my brother. I just had this instinct to pick up the art again. And I had bought a house here, old house that had a building in the back. I think it may have been used for animals or something, but it had a floor and a good structure. And I built that out to a studio. And with the help of my brother, who was in California at that time. And I remember very well, my brother came out he had worked in Washington a lot. I'll get more about him. Is very instrumental in all of my choices. But we were working on the studio one day and putting a foundation in the back of my house. And 3 or 4 of my neighbors were sitting there watching us. What are these people doing? And one of them was a good client of mine in a law practice, and couldn't figure out what these people were doing. So art is, it's not there in everybody's life. Uh, but while I was practicing law, I started to get more and more interested in the art world. And I would get up in the morning and work in that studio before I went to work, and I'd have to be at work about 9 o'clock. So I'd get up around 6:30 and do that. And then in the evenings, in this area, which is right near Washington, D.C., and the universities there, Georgetown's George Washington, uh, I would start going to art classes and drawing sessions that were sponsored by these schools. And I would be in touch with my brother. the the more I got into it, the more I felt that it was what I was here to do on earth. And it was
Mhm.
very, very attractive. My brother, I would like to tell the people viewing this podcast about him.
Mhm.
He was 4 years older than I was, and a very good athlete, also a scholarship athlete, a wide receiver and punter, William and Mary. And I really looked up to him. Can't remember him doing too much drawing. He did a couple, I think, but our mother liked to paint. Uh, she set aside a room in the back of our house, and I think it may have had an impact on both of us, my brother and me. But anyway, when he was, say, a sophomore, I think, in at William and Mary, somehow he took an art course and really got hooked on it. And William and Mary is in Williamsburg, Virginia, which has been restored to its beauty and original state by the Rockefeller Foundation. He got more and more into art, and when he graduated, he had a degree in math and an offer uh, to work at NASA in Florida. But he chose instead to get a master's in art conservation with a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, which saw his possibilities. And he went to New York and 2 years there, and he's got his degree in art conservation. And then what showed up on the, the plans was a Fulbright fellowship to go to Italy to study art conservation with some really fine conservators over there, including the person who restored the chapel, Sistine Chapel ceiling. And one person I know he worked with over there restored a lot of Rembrandts in the Rijksmuseum. And when he came back, he was living in Virginia and then got a house in Northern Virginia. And then he worked in the art world in Washington as a conservator. He worked on paintings from the Smithsonian. I remember the Freer Gallery. He restored 26 Whistler paintings there. And I remember just a very awakening when I came up from law school to visit him when he was in Northern Virginia. I went down in his basement and he had a portrait of Pocahontas, the only one that exists, that he was restoring for the Smithsonian. But that was the world he was in. And then um, the Los Angeles County Museum was just being started. And they had received a lot of funds from wealthy people to help get the museum started. And they asked him to start the conservation lab there, which he did. And in the course of starting that conservation lab, he had a kind of implied relationship with all the people who had contributed the money. Many of them were big time art collectors. The names you'd probably mention, but I'm not going to mention them now. But anyway, they were big time collectors that he would help on their collections. Spent 6 months in Europe with one of them looking for great art to collect. Well, what he did for me, though, was kind of involve me in that world. And I got a glimpse of the art world before I made this decision to become an artist that held art in a very high standard of admiration and importance. He took me to, he was really very considerate and inviting me to go to New York City with him. I was still practicing law. I took a day off and went up there with him and to view a Rubens painting that the gallery was interested in. So he took me to the gallery, met with the gallery director and viewed the Rubens painting, and then talked to me about it on the way back in the cab. And what's good about it? Is the price good? Or, what's, repetitive about other Rubens work or so forth. And one time there were 4 paintings that were coming in to the National Gallery from California, from the museums that he worked with there. And he invited me to come from my house is in Northern Virginia, near the Dulles Airport, to come out and ride with the paintings into the National Gallery. There were 4 of them. I remember one was a Gauguin, one was a Rembrandt. And on the way from Dulles Airport to the National Gallery, the van had to stop for some reason, and the guards got out with their guns. And then we took the paintings on out to the National Gallery, and he helped I watched them unload them and so forth. But just being in that world with him, it kind of, when people would get out of a cab to protect artwork, it put art on a very serious and high level for me that was the art world that I got to know. And I thought that's what the art world is. It wasn't just a hobby. It was something that people would sacrifice for, would pay for, would admire, etc. So he was a wonderful influence.